Hi, everyone. I feel like working in SEO these days feels a lot like this. It's felt a bit toxic recently, right? And it seems like everyone is trying to get out of SEO, trying to disassociate. Even some of the biggest brands, businesses in this industry are even going as far as changing their brand names away from SEO. Everyone from Moz to Gadget, you have agencies who are known for link building like Seer writing blog posts about throwing in the towel on SEO. And it's really easy to understand why, because I think doing SEO these days is a lot like going down these stairs. It's scary. You have no idea what's waiting for you at the bottom. There might be some horrific panda in a clown outfit just waiting to kill you. And this has really kind of changed the way that we think and we talk and we write and we investigate in SEO. And I think this tweet from @Cuts accurately sums it up. It's really only us SEOs who are sitting around worrying about penalties these days, while everyone else in search has moved on to things like contextual search, to conversational search, and this is really where search is going. And I think this is important to kind of get away from this fear of the penalties and get away from things like traditional link building, because if we stay stagnant, we're not just going to miss the bus on where the future of search is going and correspondingly where SEO is going, but we're going to burn it to the ground. And so instead of being a little bit nervous about the future of SEO, I think we should be excited, because I think we're really at the beginning of some of the possibilities. And I think this change is getting really started because search is changing. Historically, search was this thing that existed in the web for the web, and we really just searched against web documents. All we did is we took keywords and we put them in titles and we put them in URLs and we put them in body copy. We linked them together and we used more keywords. And it's effectively been the same thing for the last 10 to 15 years, and it hasn't really fundamentally changed. But we're really moving into a different world, to a much more mobile world, to a device-centric world. And in this world, we're not limited to our desktop with just keyword queries and documents being returned to us. We're moving to a world where we have devices in our pockets with us all the time. We have watches on our wrist and devices on our face. And in this world, search is becoming much more conversational. We'll ask for things like, what is Limburger, to discover that it's a cheese. Or we might ask and say something like, play Say It Ain't So, where the intent is not to return a document, but it's to open up an application and play a song. And how do we do search in a world like this? It completely changes the way that we're doing search and the way that we think about doing optimization. Or we search for something like schedule a meeting with Lynn, where it uses my location, the time of day to determine that I'm at work. Maybe it reviews my contacts and my recent emails to figure out who Lynn is, and then ultimately executes this query by opening up an application and sending an invite. Or lastly, something like, OK, Google, navigate to grandma's house, where it has to look at my contacts to figure out who grandmother is. It has to use local data, traffic information, maps, and then executes your query not through web documents, but through your car. And I think this is where search is going. And the most exciting thing about these queries, and also the most frightening thing about this, is that they never touch the web in the traditional sense. And the answers don't come from the web either. And so really what we see is happening is that search is getting elevated out of the web as kind of this function that exists across everything. And the web is being shrunken down into a particular type of capability, which is document search. And we see these other things being pulled in as capabilities like databases and knowledge graph and schema, applications to things like mobile app indexing, and we're really engaging with them differently. And this is just going to continue to grow. What happens when we bring in purchase information, or financial information, or health records, or your family relationships, or all your social data? And all that starts to become things that you search against and you action against, but it doesn't have anything to do with the web document. And so this really starts to kind of show us where we can go in SEO and illuminates a lot of really exciting possibilities. But it also kind of begs the question, OK, how do we get started? I think one of the best places to get started is a better understanding of how natural language processing works. And this is fundamentally what Hummingbird was. It was really about better understanding queries, breaking them down, and turning them into search terms in a natural language process. And there's 4 parts to this. The first part's pretty straightforward. You take a string, a sentence, a question, and you break it into tokens, or usable chunks, single words, phrases. And then once you've done this, you can go through parts of speech tagging. To understand how this works, you want to go back to 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade and think about sentence diagramming, when you'd have to get up on the board and say, this is the subject, and this is the predicate, this is the noun, this is a verb, this is an adjective. That's effectively what parts of speech tagging is. You take a phrase like who directed Pulp Fiction and say this is a WH pronoun, this is a verb past tense, this is a singular proper noun. And now not only do we have words, but we have meaning of those words within a particular language. We can use this meaning to imply and to infer what we should do with these words. We can infer the relationship between words by using the structure of language. But language is really complicated, and there's lots of different ways that you can say something and ask a question. So lemmatization is the process of converting things down that are similar words. So am, are, is, and be are effectively all the same thing with different uses, different tenses, etc. A better way of thinking this is you're converting words down into their canonical word. So there might be 150 ways to express a particular statement, and it all gets summed down in just one way of asking that question. And lastly, and this is the one that everyone's probably the most familiar with, is named entity extraction. We're not just trying to determine what these words mean within language, we're trying to figure out what these words mean within the context of the real world. Do they have relationships? Do they have attributes? What do they mean? People, places, things, events, etc. And if you're nerdy like me, you can actually replicate a lot of this type of stuff. You can actually build tools and programs around this yourself. You can download something like OpenNLP, which can do tokenization, parts of speech tagging, and named entity extraction as well. And the better we understand how natural language processing works, the better we understand things like knowledge graph and hummingbird. So what you see in a situation like this, effectively all Google is doing is they're breaking down the sentence, who directed Pulp Fiction, based off of natural language. They understand then how they can go and do a query against the database, and we can replicate this ourselves. So you can use a language called MQL, or MQL, which is a structured query language that allows you to talk to Freebase, and you can send it over through a Google API. And using this, you can take a natural language question, such as who directed the movie Pulp Fiction, and you can understand that what this actually means is, can you return the name of the person of type people who has the attribute directed for the film Pulp Fiction. And when you push this against the database, you actually get a structured reply that says Quentin Tarantino. And this is effectively how Knowledge Graph is working. This is how Google Now is working. This is how they're answering these questions very rapidly without actually going to a particular web page to get that result. But let's say you're a little less comfortable with coding. You don't want to do this yourself. So there's this really cool Python library called Quippy that actually has built-in natural language processing, and it can take a string and convert it into a MQL query for you directly. So you can ask something like, who is the author of Game of Thrones? And it will spit out queries that will allow you to directly engage with DBpedia and Freebase themselves. And this is really exciting because it starts to illuminate a lot of the possibilities that we can do things differently in terms of content creation, content optimization, link building, and development of technical SEO. And so, for example, I'm working on something at Getty where we're trying to curate all of our content around known entities. So we have thousands and tens of thousands of photos of Emma Watson. How do we go about creating a more curated experience by layering in information from the knowledge graph? And once you tie a tagged photo with a known entity in it, I can tie that to Freebase and start pulling in attributes and relationships between that entity, other people, and locations. You can use that for internal linking, navigation, content, and targeting as well. But once you start doing this type of stuff and you get into the space of entities, it really changes the way that we think about keyword targeting and keyword research. So both of these two people are named Brad Pitt. One is a famous actor who you might know. The other one is a little less famous. It's an Olympic boxer. And traditional keyword research would suggest, or keyword targeting would suggest, that we're going to put Brad Pitt in the title and the URL and the H1 and somewhere in the body copy, at the beginning, at the end, et cetera. And this is how we target stuff. But that process doesn't make either one of the two pages more or less targeted for either Brad Pitt. And so we're really changing the way that we're going to think about targeting and writing content. And so really, as we're moving into this kind of next level of keyword targeting, it's really understanding that natural language plays a role and that things have attributes. And so I can use attributes to help disambiguate which entity I'm talking about. If I want to target Brad Pitt, the actor, I might use things like actor, producer, Angelina Jolie, Fight Club, so that I don't just have to use the same as tag and schema to help disambiguate who I'm talking about. Or I might use martial arts, boxing, Olympics to let them know that I'm talking about the Olympic boxer, Brad Pitt. But it's also really exciting when you start to think of how they can use natural language processing. Let's take a sentence like, Getty has great photos of Brad Pitt. And they can determine that Getty Images is a known entity that is a company that has an associated website. And then it says they have photos of Brad Pitt. And we're effectively generating what are implicit links, implicit citations. You can look at the mention of the entity as effectively being the AH reference. and the kind of connection at the end of has Brad Pitt photos as being the anchor text. And so you can see ways that they can start to use natural language processing to better understand the content that is associated with different entities, including real life things as well as online businesses. And so one way to start getting at what are the attributes that you should be targeting is a quick little hack you can do with Ubersuggest, which effectively scales out search suggest. Find an entity that you're targeting of a particular type. So let's say NFL quarterbacks. From that, I will find a couple of high-profile quarterbacks, let's say Russell Wilson and Peyton Manning. By putting this in here with question words, I can start to find all the attributes that people are searching for relative to them, compile those all to a list, strip out all the entities, and do a pivot and a count to determine what attributes people are searching for the most. And I can determine that with NFL quarterbacks, people want to know how fast do they run the 40, where did they go to college, and what is their salary. And you can start using this in your content targeting. You can also use Freebase to dynamically pull in content for your title tags, for example. So in this example of Russell Wilson, you can pull in the name, the number, the position, the team, the city, and the state, all programmatically using Freebase and Mickle. And why this is also useful is you can start targeting what I like to call implicit entity searches, which is where you're searching for something that implies the result of an entity, but doesn't expressly mention it. So examples of that would be Seahawks number 3, or Seattle quarterback, where that actually means a real entity, but I'm not searching for that entity's name. And by going in and looking at the most popular attributes that people are searching for around entities, we can back our way into those implicit queries. You can also use these attributes for categorical targeting. So I can figure out the entity type and attributes associated with them, use a logic chart to kind of change the way I'm targeting. So Emma Watson, she's an actress, so I'm going to go after publicity, events, or premiere photos. Whereas Seahawks is a sports team, so I'm going to go after team photos or player photos. And Justin Bieber, as a musician, I might target things like concert photos. And so you can get a little bit more sophisticated in how you're doing your keyword targeting. And this makes me excited because it starts to breathe new life into something that I think historically was a little stagnant, like keyword research. You also want to make sure that you're marking everything up with schema. I'm not going to get into the details of how, just Google it. It's been written about a lot. Go to schema.org. But the reason why this is important is schema takes you from web to data. Schema effectively allows your website, in the form of a document, to become queryable in the same way that we were using Mickle earlier. It builds structured databases out of your website. And so by better implementing schema, you can start to move into this more advanced world. And you see Google move in this direction. You see schema.org move in this direction with the support of JSON LD. And JSON LD is a JSON link data format that allows you to mark up schema in JSON, not just an inline copy using microdata. And this is really important as we move into a world that's focused on app indexation. And so now you can actually map a subsection of your mobile app to a page on your website using rel alternative. And so this is where we start getting into that world of how do I perform a query that executes an application function? How do I say a query that opens up a map and drives my car? And that's through things like app indexation. And not only can you make apps crawlable, and we start moving technical SEO into the world of application optimization, but we can mark up schema inside of mobile applications as well. So this is a deep section within the Spotify application where they're actually saying this part of the application is Imagine Dragon. And so as it's indexing this, they're actually looking at schema information to tie what's inside of an app back to the knowledge graph. And so personally, I think it's a really exciting time for SEO, and I'm looking for kind of where the next couple of years go. And I think that it's really easy sometimes to think that we're at the end of the party, that we're at the end of the curve in terms of where is SEO going and what can we do with it. I actually think the opposite is true. I think we're at the very beginning of search. I mean, we've really only solved document analysis, and we've not even really done that very well. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity in terms of the things that we can optimize and where we can go. And I think this is important because I think search is going to be the basis for what a lot of us want to be kind of AI. If you've ever seen the movie Her, I think that's where search is going. The Star Trek computer, and I think that there are a few other professions that are better suited to help optimize and make accessible the source content that we're going to be using for machine learning and AI. And honestly, I think if we're all going to go to content marketing, who's actually going to be doing this stuff? And so personally, I'd like to get the Star Trek computer faster. And so hopefully everyone will continue to look at some of the new opportunities that come up in search and SEO as well. And thank you.
I told you, mind blown. So I'm pretty sure that we're going to have a lot of questions, but I want to ask you a personal question.
Uh-oh.
I want to ask you, what are some things that you would do to, if I wanted to, say, rank for my name, Jennifer Lopez, what are some fun things that I could do to, like, focus on? Any ideas?
Oh, man, that's hard.
On the spot.
On the
J-Lo.
spot. So, I mean, I think it's relatively straightforward. I mean, if it's your personal site, obviously try to get your exact match domain or something related to that. I think it just makes it a little bit easier. Sorry, it would. But beyond that, really focusing on building your personal brand. I think getting into speaking and blogging, not only has it helped me rank for my own name, and kind of to the detriment of every other Justin Briggs in the world, but it's fundamentally changed my life. And so I think there's a lot of additional benefits that you can get out there in terms of try to say something new and something different. I think every single time I try to talk or I try to write, my goal is say something that's never been said before. Find the smartest person in the room, find like a Will Reynolds, find a Rand, find the people who taught you and say, what can I teach them? And I think the more often you try to do things like that, the more successful you'll be you'll passively just rank for your name without having to try to, so.
I'll try that.
It's a little harder.
Thank you.
Or you could just spam some links, and that would probably still work too.
I'm pretty sure she already does that well, but thank you.
Yeah.
It looks like we have a question right out here. We'll start out here.
All right, so it seems like you're getting a lot of, over here, getting a lot of mileage out of natural language processing, which is great to see. As a community, I think we're getting a lot of mileage out of NLP. I'm curious about related technologies like, say, computer vision. You're sitting on this gold mine of images. Have you thought about using computer vision techniques to be able to say things like Brad Pitt brushing his teeth and similar?
Yeah, we have. So obviously, I don't work on that myself directly inside of Getty, but we do have a team. There's a few different ways that we've tackled it. We do have a tool called PicScout, which can do some type of image recognition. It crawls the entire internet and tries to determine where our photos are being used, and we can grab a lot of information from that. We also do some image processing to help us with our tagging, so we do some basic stuff. It's hard to do some of the more sophisticated stuff, like we can detect color, whether or not there's a person in this photo. I wouldn't say that it's as advanced as something like Google's, but we are getting there, and we kind of use people to actually confirm that the attributes that are getting assigned to it are correct. But it's very cost intensive, and so right now, for the most part, it's really focused on tagging the photos during the intake process. But there are technologies that we're working on trying to get better at doing processing to understand what's in that photo. But I think if you look at the Google research blog, there's some really great stuff there. I'm not sure if you read it. They have a whole article where they share where they've been trying to figure things out. And they're like, this is a false positive. This is where we thought a dog was actually a bear. And so they'll go through some examples of what they're trying to do there.
Excellent. Before we head to lunch, do you have any more questions for Justin? I'm pretty sure that as soon as you walk off this stage, you're about to get pummeled with questions.
I'll be around all night if you want to chat.
Okay. Thank you so much, Justin.
Thank you.
That was amazing. Thank you.